Visitors to Scotland's Loch Ness have sworn that they have seen a monster coming up from the depths. It was about 50 to 60 feet long. And for a moment there, everybody on that ship just froze. It is 20 to 11 in the morning, 90 kilometers off the coast of Western Australia. And three experienced fishermen are about to see something no one has ever been able to explain. It rises from 600 m down. It is longer than their boat. It moves like no whale, no shark, nothing with a name. They film it. They keep the sonar log. It leaves marks along their hull, 40 feet, and I see this enormous thing swimming like this. And when they bring all of it to the scientists whose whole job is knowing what lives down there, those experts take one look, go quiet, and never give them an answer. The encounter. David has fished the deep water off Esperance since 1987, out where the continental shelf falls away from this remote town on the southern edge of Western Australia, and the seabed drops past 4,000 m within sight of the coast. Most Australians have never heard of Esperance, and the ocean there does nothing to advertise itself, brilliant and clear in the shallows before it turns a deep, almost violent blue, and simply vanishes downward. The size of a 2 to 4 story house in the deep ocean that we've never seen. That's crazy. That morning, it was the same 4,000 m of cold, black, pressurized water that sat beneath his boat when the sonar first flagged something at 600 m at roughly 20 minutes to 11. He and his crew had been on the water since before dawn, running lines for southern bluefin tuna, the valuable fish that moves through here in the southern autumn. The morning had been unremarkable. Normal swells, good visibility, the kind of quiet, productive start a working crew learns to appreciate and never fully trusts. So when the sonar first marked a contact down at 600 m, David barely looked. Sonar flags, all kinds of things down there. Thermal layers, bait schools, drifting junk. Then the surface changed. Not dramatically. Nothing breached. It was more like a pressure shift. A slow displacement rising from below. The way water moves when something genuinely enormous is repositioning itself far beneath you. The sea darkened in a spreading circle, maybe 40 m across. And then they saw it. Something dark and vast slid directly beneath the hull, close enough to the surface that its outline was clearly visible through the water. It was not a shadow. It was not a trick of the light. All three men saw it in the same instant, and all three of them stopped moving and stood completely still. Whatever it was longer than their boat. Their boat was 11 m. What was underneath them was considerably more. One man put it between 15 and 20 meters. The evidence. The footage was not the only thing they carried back. Modern boats log almost everything, and the sonar record from that morning was captured automatically by the vessel's navigation unit. What it had registered at 600 m in the minutes before anyone looked over the side was not the diffuse scattered signal you get from a school of fish. It was not the flat horizontal band you get from a thermal layer. It was a discrete moving high mass return. Something solid, something big. A school of fish scatters across the screen. A thermal layer lies down flat and stays there. This didn't either. This held together as a single shape and moved with purpose, and the electronics had no trouble at all telling it apart from the water around it. For a sense of scale, an adult great white shark weighs somewhere around a single metric ton. A humpback whale runs between 25 and 30. Whatever this was sat well up that scale, heavy enough that the instrument read it as an object, not a shadow. And then there were the markings along the starboard side of the hull, just above the waterline. There were lines that had not been there when the boat left port. 3 of them parallel, pressed into the gel coat of the fiberglass, running the same direction. Each a few centimeters wide, spaced roughly a hand's width apart, not deep enough to threaten the hull. They looked like something large and smooth-edged had brushed along the side of the boat with the lightest possible contact. David has no memory of anything touching the vessel, and he does not think he would have missed it. But then, for those 4 minutes, every part of him had been fixed on the water, not the paint. He would only understand what those marks might mean much later. And by then, it was already too late to get anyone official to come and look. The easy answers. Whenever a story like this surfaces, 2 tidy explanations get offered up almost at once. And I want to walk you through both because, on paper, they sound reasonable, and in the water they do not hold. The first is the oarfish. The oarfish is a genuinely spectacular animal, the longest bony fish we know of, capable of reaching 8 m and possibly more. Long and ribbon-like, and moving through undulation. On paper, a decent candidate, except an oarfish is only about as wide as a human torso at its thickest point. It is a long silver noodle. What these men described had breadth and bulk, and it shoved a wall of water aside as it turned. An oarfish does not produce the heavy solid sonar return that navigation unit recorded, and it does not leave 3 broad parallel marks along a hull. The second explanation is the aggregation idea, the suggestion that a cluster of smaller animals swimming in tight formation created the illusion of one giant creature. This one falls apart on the movement. A group of animals moving together produces a regular shifting motion, a shimmer that never quite resolves into a single shape. What passed under that boat moved as one integrated body in one smooth, unified undulation. And 40 seconds of footage plus 3 separate witnesses all describe the same single thing. You do not get that from a crowd. You get it from an animal, which is where a lot of people would stop satisfied. Except this exact stretch of ocean has done something like this before. And that case was never a rumor whispered between fishermen. It was recorded, tagged, and filmed. And it has never been solved. The Shark Alpha Case. In 2003, a filmmaker and naturalist named Dave Riggs was part of an early great white shark tagging project along this same southern coast of Western Australia. A 3-meter female great white was fitted with a tracking tag off Bremer Bay, a short way up the coast from Esperon. The idea was simple. Follow her. Learn something. For months later, the tag washed ashore, and the story it told was hard to read any comfortable way. For weeks, the shark had behaved normally. Then, in an instant, she plunged from near the surface straight down the edge of the shelf to around 580 m, and at that depth, the tag recorded a sudden, violent temperature spike, leaping from the cold of the deep to something close to the temperature inside the gut of a large, warm-blooded animal. The tag had, in plain terms, been swallowed. By every account, the people involved were stunned. And these were not nervous amateurs. These were researchers who had spent their careers around large sharks. And the question it left behind is the one nobody has answered since. What eats a healthy 3-meter great white shark whole, drags it down 600 meters, and leaves nothing behind but a tag on a beach? A bigger cannibal great white was floated as a theory, though the temperature reading never sat cleanly with it. A killer whale was suggested, except killer whales almost never dive anywhere near that deep. A sperm whale came up too and faded. The point is not that anyone knows. The point is that right here in this water, science tagged an apex predator, watched something larger make it vanish, and then simply ran out of answers. So, when 3 fishermen a little further down the same coast say they watched something enormous rise beneath them, they're not the first credible people to run straight into the edge of what we actually know about this place. And the ocean has a long habit of proving that edge is closer than we think. A deeper pattern, because the ocean does not just hide big animals. It hides the fact that they were ever there at all. Take the giant squid. For centuries, it was written off as a sailor's fever dream, a kraken, a story told to explain ships that never came home. Serious people were still arguing about whether it truly existed when the first photographs of a living one were finally captured in 2004. 2004, not some candlelit century, a time when people already carried cameras in their pockets and we were still debating whether one of the largest animals in the sea was real. If something that size can stay off the record until this century, how sure should we really be about the rest of the list? Then there is the Zuio Maru. In 1977, a Japanese trawler working off New Zealand along the same broad southern ocean system as Australia hauled up a large rotting carcass in its nets. Several meters long with what looked like a small head on a long neck, big paired fins, and a tapering tail. To the crew, and briefly to a startled public, it looked uncannily like a plesiosaur, a marine reptile supposedly extinct for 66 million years. Photographs were taken. The body was dumped back into the sea before anyone could preserve it, which is its own quiet tragedy. Later, tissue analysis pointed most strongly toward a decomposing basking shark whose bodies rot down into exactly that false long-necked shape. So, no, almost certainly not a living dinosaur, but sit with what it tells you anyway. This ocean routinely serves up things that stop experienced professionals cold, at least until the science catches up. And deep surveys off Western Australia keep hauling back species, new to science, by the dozen from water we had told ourselves we already understood. Faceless fish. Fish with light built into their skin. Creatures that had never once been recorded by anyone pulled up in a single expedition. Every serious look into the deep here seems to come back with a longer list of what we missed, and no reason at all to think the list is finished. What it could be. So, let me be honest with you about the question you actually clicked on. What was it? I do not know. Nobody knows. That is the entire point of this story. But there are real candidates worth taking seriously. And they are stranger than you might expect. The most cautious possibility is a known kind of animal doing something or reaching a size we have simply never recorded. A large cephalopod is one option. The cold, oxygen-rich, deep water off southern Australia is exactly the kind of place where a slow-metabolizing animal could grow enormous over a very long life and almost never come near the surface where a human might catch it. We already know these waters hide giants we have barely met. The biology does not rule it out. And the movement the men described, that long whole-body undulation, is not as far from a big, soft-bodied animal as it first sounds. A second possibility is a large marine mammal with an unusual body. There are more than 20 species of beaked whale, and several were only formally described in the last few decades, some from little more than a skull that washed up on a beach. The ocean hides big mammals with real success, and has done so for a long time. A whale the length of a school bus can live an entire life in these waters and surface for a stranger maybe once. The trouble is the movement. Whales flex vertically because they descend from land mammals whose spines bend up and down. What was described at Esperance moved horizontally along its whole length, more like a fish or a reptile than a mammal. And that single detail quietly rules out a lot of otherwise comfortable answers. And then there is the possibility no one in mainstream science will say out loud in a professional setting, though a few will admit it quietly, that the deep southern oceans might hold large animals that do not fit any group we currently recognize. The far south was a refuge during the great extinctions that periodically reset life on this planet. And the deep cold water off southern Australia has stayed remarkably stable in temperature and chemistry across enormous spans of time. If any large lineage ever survived a global catastrophe by slipping into deep, cold, stable water and simply staying there, this is exactly the kind of place you would look. I'm not telling you it is a sea monster. I am telling you the description fits nothing on our current map of marine life. And that map is far thinner than most people assume, which brings us to the strangest part of the whole affair. Not what the men saw. What happened when they tried to report it. The silence. I want to be careful here, because words like cover-up get thrown around in stories like this in lazy and often unfair ways. So, let me be precise. I'm not telling you a captured creature is sitting in a secret tank outside Perth. I have no evidence of that, and I am not suggesting it. What I am pointing to is quieter and honestly more believable. Reports of large, strange, unexplained animals in these southern waters have a way of being received, filed, and then left to gather dust. Not through some dramatic conspiracy, but through the far more ordinary force of institutional caution meeting professional self-preservation. Think about what it would cost a working scientist to publicly back a claim like this. The academic world has a brutally efficient way of handling anyone who lends their name to an anomaly that does not fit the accepted picture. You become the researcher who believed in sea monsters. Grants cool. Papers get harder to place. Colleagues get slower to return your calls. None of that needs a villain. It is just culture, and it lands in the same place a cover-up would. The honest assessment stays private, muttered between colleagues who trust each other. The public gets the tidy, forgettable answer, the oarfish, the school of fish, the trick of the light, and everyone moves on to the next thing. The men live the quiet version of,